The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.
Hello, friends. I'm David Pasqualone, and welcome to this week's remarkable episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, the Sam Thiara Story. When you listen to this episode, you're going to hear Sam. Sam is a keynote speaker for TEDx conferences. Sam is a university professor. Sam has written books. Sam does consulting and coaching. Sam has all of these accolades. He has degrees in business, and he's the man that took 86 rejection letters before he became a janitor. Yeah. So you are going to hear so much about Sam and about learning how his life, how God just had a path for him. And it doesn't seem like a lot of this stuff would be quote unquote good, but it worked. And he has a great attitude. So he's going to teach you how to have the right positive mental attitude. He's going to teach you 3 keys to life, lessons he's learned. He's going to share with us acronyms like STARTs. They're going to help us better ourselves and grow. And it's not only going to be entertaining to see Sam's journey of seeing his dad become a paraplegic at 9 and, stepping up to help the family, how in high school he started getting picked on for his nationality. And then it sends him into a deep dive to identify who he really is. But you get so much more. So like most of our episodes, they go deep, they go wide. Keep listening. Don't just shut it off halfway through. There could be a gem almost at the end that changes your life. So I'm David Pasqualone. You're about to hear our remarkable friend Sam's story. Listen to a couple of our sponsors that support us. That means they support you. See if you can support them, and then check out this episode of the show. We love you, and we'll see you in just a literal second. Can you believe that we're in season 4 of the Remarkable People podcast? It's been such an honor and privilege. I'm so thankful to God. I'm so thankful for you. I'm so thankful for our guests, and that we can all grow together. And at this time, I know you're thinking, why is he talking about this during the sponsor hour minute? The reason is because from the very beginning of the show to today, Pam Heinold has supported our podcast, has supported the ministry, has supported you. So if you're looking to buy, sell, get an investment property, get a condo on the beach for vacations, call Pam Heinold. Pam Heinold is one of the top agents in Pensacola, Florida. She can help you with whatever your situation is, or at minimum point you in the right direction. I've personally used Pam in the past to buy homes. She's been fantastic. We've gone to church together. We've worked together in varying capacities. We've been in marketing groups together. We've gone to church together, and we're friends. So Pam Heinold loves God. She loves the Remarkable People podcast, and she loves you. So please, if you're going to look at real estate in Pensacola, give Pam a call. You can check her out at pamheinold.com. That's PAMHEINOLD.com. And you can get her phone number in the show notes or from her website. That's it. Now enjoy this remarkable episode. Hey, Sam, how are you today, brother?
Hey, doing well. Thank you, David.
Oh, thank you for being here. I am excited about our interview today, and I just told our listeners about you in the intro. So at this time, we're going to get on with your story, man. Where you're from, how you grew up, the good, the bad, the ugly of your life. And then we're going to transition to where you are today and where you're going. So after you help us learn to grow and give us practical steps to also overcome what you have, then we're going to try to help you hit your next milestone or benchmark. Sound good?
Hey, that sounds wonderful.
Awesome, brother. Then let's start, man. Where were you born? Where were you from? And what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, so I was born in a town called Southampton, England. And Southampton sits right on the coast in southern England. And at the age of 4, I wound up, hopping on a plane with my parents, and we moved to Vancouver, Canada. as an opportunity was available, my father thought Canada seemed like a beautiful place. Actually, what was really interesting is my parents are from Fiji Islands, which is just near Australia and New Zealand. And then my father wound up going to England because he thought there's some good opportunities there. And in England, they decided, okay, now we're moving to Canada. And we never moved away from Vancouver, Canada ever since. Grew up in a beautiful part of the West Coast. And, we've got an abundance of wildlife and trees and just wonderful seasons, and just made my life here in Vancouver.
That's awesome. Now, would you say your childhood was quote unquote normal? Was there any trauma? Was there any kind of like, wow, we lived an elite expectation life?
Yeah.
I mean, what was your childhood like overall?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up like any other child, and went to school. I would come home, go out and play with my friends. However, when I was 9 years old, I still remember the day very vividly. I came home, my aunt was there, and she made me a cup of tea. And she said, before you go and play with your friends, I just wanted to let you know your dad had an accident. Now, as a 9-year-old, I still hold this vision of the accident where my father's car rolls into a ditch and he walked home. Actually, instead, he had an industrial accident and he became a paraplegic. And I write about it in a book that I published. At 9 years old, you don't even know what paraplegia is, let alone even be able to say the word. But what it did was, it just totally changed our life. Now, some people may say, your childhood got robbed. You wound up having to take on so many tremendous responsibilities at the age of 9 because it was my mom, my brother, and I, and not a lot of family at that time. But my brother and I still wound up hanging out with friends and going to school, but there were more responsibilities thrust upon us. We had to start doing obviously more chores and, learn about, how to deal with paraplegia and my father's disability. But the thing was that I never looked at it as a negative situation. And I learned this at the age of 9. We as a family never dwelled on it was good or bad. And obviously it wasn't good, but it wasn't also bad, because what we decided was, if we looked at this as a bad experience, it was going to pull us into a vortex. And my father wound up going to rehab and, confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. But equally at the same time, we never looked at the 1,000 things he can't do, and the main one being he could never walk again. But we focused on, let's do the 5,000 things we can do. I mean, and he was a carpenter and a craftsman. So he wound up teaching me woodworking, electrical, plumbing, just all of these small things that you could do around the house. He and I actually also built a bedroom suite together, which I still have, and he's still with us as well.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah,
That's
but those are the
fantastic.
things that you pick up. Yeah, you learn as long as you're willing to learn and be open to these experiences. The opportunities and the learning is there for us in life.
And that's the right attitude and the healthy attitude.
Mhm.
Did your family always have that positive mindset, or is that something you learned
Mhm.
through this experience of paraplegia?
I think that we had it, but we never realized it until the situation emerged and it came face to face and confronted us. And but we made a decision. And I remember my mom was going to quit her job and start looking after my dad, and our doctor, I'd have to say, a very wise man, told my mom, don't quit. He said, if you quit, he's going to depend on you for everything. But what we need for him to do is become independent and do things on his own. And then as a result, my mom continued to work, and my father wound up, looking after the household. He, even he would drive his car with hand controls. We had an elevator at the house, which was a novel item because my friends would want to come over to go up and down the elevator in our house, because whose house has an elevator? But what we wound up doing is, really focusing on let's move forward from this and let's not dwell on this. And I remember having a conversation with someone who said, yeah, it's really, terrible what happened to your family back many years ago. And I said, actually, it's not terrible. And she goes, that's such a terrible thing to say. And I said, no, it's not terrible, but it's not good. Our hand was dealt. And as a result of this, I have to move forward. And, David, even to this day, it brings me to where I am. And it's resonated throughout my life because my parents are still around, but they're aging and they have some difficulties and problems with health. And then equally at the same time, my older brother and my only sibling has advanced forms of Alzheimer's, and he's only 60 years old. And we've had to confront and deal with that. But I've told myself, it's about, here's the hand that's been dealt to us. We have to just, you can't hope, pray, or wish for anything else. This is our reality. Let's move on.
Wow, that really is such a healthy mindset. But at the same time, it's so hard for many of us to adopt that and to think that way because we have a tendency, we want to blame or we want to dwell. Like I know myself, I've had stuff happen to me in life, and some of the stuff, no matter how terrible it was, I just picked up and shook it off. And there's other things that I still to this day haven't shaken. So what tips do you have, practical steps for our listeners to say, okay, you're in a hole. Like you called it a vortex. I wrote that down. Like you'll notice, for those of you listening, you have no idea what we're doing. But for those of you watching, you'll see my head keep popping down. I'm writing. You talked about you'd be pulled into this vortex and this valley, this depression, whatever you want to call it. How do you recommend listeners start changing their mindset? And no matter what they've been dealt, what's happened to them, what people purposely did to them, how do you recommend some steps to get out?
Yeah, and I think one of the most important pieces of this is the fact that you have to take ownership of this and don't let the situation control you. You can control the situation. And I remember coming up with this. My friends who know me always say, Sam, you're so full of acronyms. And I said, there's an acronym that I came up with that helped me and helps me, but it also helps others. And I say, STARTS. In other words, the acronym is STARTS for mental health, and it's something that I found has always helped me. STARTS. So the S stands for support. We need to come up and create a supportive environment. T stands for trust. Once you have a supportive environment, trust establishes. The third piece is appreciation. So that's the A of STARTS. And appreciation means that when we're going through challenging and difficult times, we forget to appreciate the things around us. Now, how do we appreciate is through the R, which is reflection. In other words, start thinking about things from a much different perspective than the obvious that's around you. And the second T is for talks. We need to have healthy conversations with the people that we trust. And then the last S of STARTS means strength. After all of this, we all emerge from a position of strength. So we need to create support, trust, appreciation, reflection, talk, strength. And this is something that I can reflect back on throughout my life as things go in a certain direction. Well, that's one way to deal with it. But overwhelmingly, I think the way that I've always held it is I control the situation doesn't control me. And I think that's a mindset that we need to absorb and to hold within us, because it can be an overbearing beast. But when you say, no, I understand, and you make that statement, I understand, here's the situation. Now I'm going to start moving it into my quarter. You can't change the circumstances. I can't change my brother's Alzheimer's or my parents are aging or my father's paraplegia, but I can change how I'm going to deal with the situation. That's the way I would say.
Let me ask you a question. This is something that for people who are super positive and have the right mindset, I've always wondered this. The first guest I've asked that I can think of in 70 episodes or whatever we're at, early Alzheimer's. That's kind of just life. That's not a specific person.
Right.
Your dad's accident,
Mhm.
that might have been caused, but it wasn't intentional.
Yep.
All these things that life, you could have a tsunami
Mhm.
come in. Those are all
Mhm.
kind of like natural, uncontrollable things.
Mhm.
But do you feel the same approach works for people who've been harmed? Like
Mhm.
a woman is raped by a man.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
was an intentional harm.
Yep.
A spouse cheats on another spouse. That was an
Mhm.
intentional harm.
Mhm.
Someone robbed you and stole all your belongings. That's an intentional harm. Do you feel like it's a separate process or there's an
Mhm.
additional component to forgiving someone and getting through an intentional harm versus a natural disaster?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that's a very good point, and I appreciate the way that you've brought that up, because again, those are traumatic situations that have been imposed upon a person that, again, they had no control over that situation. I I can say it's very difficult for that person to forgive someone for what the harm that they caused them. For example, here in Canada, we just found out that residential school system against First Nations, they found a mass grave of 215 children and at a residential school here. And there were numerous residential schools. How many more of this happened? This harm was put upon all of these First Nations families. Well, how do we move forward now? And you know, I guess part of it is needing to understand those situation that has emerged, that's been imposed upon you, but equally at the same time, if it's possible, and I can't say wholeheartedly because I haven't encountered that type of situation that you've described, that I can't really put myself in their position to say, yeah, just get over it and forgive them, because that harm is very deep. And I think that by having conversations with people, you've lost that level of trust with people. And how do we gain that back again? And maybe starts as a way, but equally at the same time, that I personally feel that will always be with them. And it may rise at different times and surface at different times. And we have to respect and appreciate. It's easy for us as observers to judge. And oftentimes, when I'm teaching my class, I tell people, you may, as an observer, judge someone. It's right or wrong, good or bad. Uh, but let's look at it at a much more deeper and realistic level. The person who's gone through this trauma, we don't need to tell them anything. We need to listen to them. And that's, I think, what's critical. I don't think we listen enough. I think we're there to try to fix people's problems or, have you thought of this or try this? I personally think that what I need to do is just sit and listen. And, David, I've had people approach me. I mean, I have 3 to 8 conversations a week with people, and some of the conversations are very difficult, where people have contemplated suicide. People have told me about, some deep secrets that they've held and, that they've been carrying this burden. And I don't judge them, but I listen to what they have to say. I need to help them unload this burden, but it will always be with them.
Yes. And for those listening, like we mentioned, Sam's a TEDx speaker. He's a professional. He does coaching and consulting and all these great things. But what he's talking about right there is very true. And I found in my own consulting practice, a lot of times we're working with CEOs
Mhm.
and their problem isn't in the boardroom or in the office. It's in their own headspace,
Yeah.
in their own heart, and in their home. So if you're looking, I'm pointing to the camera, me, Sam, all of us, we have to be at peace with God, at peace with ourselves, and then at peace with each other. And everything really falls into place. And like God says, love God, love thy neighbor as thyself. All right. So you do agree with me that there is, and you don't have to agree with me, but in my mind, there's a difference between being able to just jump back up from a natural disaster versus an intentional harm. And I've worked really hard in my life to forgive those intentional harms, but man, it's just hard to forget. And then you
Yeah.
have the people who judge you. that are like, oh, you know, you're not forgiving them. And I'm like, I do forgive them, but the trust is gone. The respect is gone. It's like, but how do people not see that? So I'm thinking they've probably never gone through the trauma in their life and they're just judgmental. So it's like, then I get angry and want to smack them in the head. Right. So now I got a new sin in my life, but be angry and sin not. I don't hit them, but I want to.
Yeah.
So, okay, Sam, so go on. So now in your life,
Yep.
you're growing up, you have a great childhood, you guys move to Vancouver, your dad has this industrial accident, and then your family learns to adapt and overcome. And you're really, you like you said, if I didn't point it out, you were having a good life. I had a great childhood, right? So pick us up from there into where you're transitioning through life and what you're learning on your journey.
Yeah. And so as growing up, I mean, I'm not the person you see before you. Back in, especially high school, I have to say high school was not the heyday for me. It wasn't the best of times. I was awkward, shy, and quiet. And, one of those individuals that just sort of blended into the backdrop and background and never to be seen or heard. And, encountered bullying. And it really impacted me in a certain way where as an individual, I was, always growing up as I thought a Canadian and played road hockey, hung out with my friends and all that. And then when I got into high school at grade 8, there's a grade 12 student, a football player who, whenever he saw me, would just hit me for no reason. And he said, well, I just don't like your kind. And I was like, what do you mean I'm Canadian? And he was like, no, you're Indian and I just don't like your kind. And, it just sort of made me wonder, like, how could somebody be this way or treat people this way? And it suddenly, like I said, and this happened a fair bit, and then thankfully he graduated. But there were other times where, you get bullied because of any number of reasons. And I told myself at that stage that I'm not going to be a bystander in life. I am there as an advocate for people. And I even remember, because I was awkward, shy, and quiet, I went to see my counselor and basically was happy to tell him that, I was graduating and that I was going to go to a local college. And he looked at me and he said, Sam, I don't know, maybe you might want to rethink your plans because I don't know if you're going to fare well in that environment. Now, my marks weren't really bad, but they weren't really great. They were just sort of middle of the road. But it was more of the personality I had, awkward, shy, quiet. He says, I don't know if you're going to fare well. You may want to rethink your plans. Now, I had already submitted an application to my local college, but I was going to apply at other places. But then I thought, now, you know what? Do I now withdraw my application? Because here's somebody who said you're not going to do well. Well, I thought, you know what? The college isn't going to accept my application because this person said I don't fit in. So I thought, I'll leave it alone and maybe I'll see what else options I have. Well, a letter arrived saying, congratulations, we look forward to welcoming you in September. I just remember sitting there going like, what do I do now? Thankfully, and think of it this way, I was this close, like literally very close to withdrawing my application. But I thought, okay, I may as well just go. But the first semester I went to college, imposter syndrome. I felt I don't belong here. Somebody told me that you don't belong here. And it just seemed like, what am I doing here? I shouldn't be here. But at the end of the semester, my marks were all right. They weren't the best, they weren't the worst, but I was all right. And I did another semester. And then I wound up applying to university. I got in and I was like, okay. And again, going through university. And this is where I think I started to open up. And part of it is from a cultural aspect, other part from a personal aspect of bringing out my personality. But I mean, I'll just give a quick fast forward that I graduated university. And sitting at graduation, I said, man, I can't believe how wrong that person was. And then later on, I went years later, got my master's, and now I teach at university. I can't believe how wrong this person was and how close I was to walking away from what was rightfully mine. But what was interesting about this is in university, and so growing up where I was in North Vancouver, it's predominantly a Caucasian population. There was literally just a small handful of kids that were of minority, a visible minority. But when I got to university, I suddenly was embraced by people from my cultural background. And it just opened up a huge avenue of wanting to learn more about my cultural upbringing, because I was British, I was Canadian, I'm Indian and Fijian by my parents, but I really was disconnected to my Indian roots, and same with my Fijian roots. And it started to open up my eyes to, wow, wait a minute, there's this diversity piece that, I think that I can now hold. So that took me all the way to university. And, university was definitely a better place than what my high school experience was.
Yeah, because a lot of people are like-minded. You're all there by choice. You're not just forced because you live in the same block, right?
Yeah.
I hated high school. I hated every minute of pretty much kindergarten through 12th grade. I wasn't a school guy. And I, like you, God has a sense of humor, ended up teaching at a college as well. So it's
Nice.
like, isn't it funny how the people told us we'd be nothing, and
Yep.
then we're teaching at a university? It's just amazing. So let's rewind a little. Because there's listeners now who have been told their whole life they're worthless, they're no good, you're never going to make anything of yourself. Or maybe they have the imposter syndrome and they're thinking, everybody thinks I can do this, but I can't. And that's a lie. But what advice do you have for them? How do they break free and get, at least, like you said, at least try it, Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting because my second TEDx that I did was activating the voice within to be louder than the noise around. I think that there's a lot of this noise of people telling you what to do and how to do it. And that part of the reason being is we haven't taken the time to really understand who we are. By knowing who you are, you now have some level of confidence that you're able to now grasp this and start moving forward. So what I would ask people to do is, instead of listening to the noise, start seeking out the champions and enablers, the people who are there to support your journey, who aren't going to tell, but instead are there to say, how can I support your journey? What is it that's important to you? But there's some heavy lifting that's required by the individual who is seeking. In other words, how do you find the voice within, and instead of the noise around? So that's where I think it's really important for that individual to be active in listening to what's important to them and start pursuing the voice within. Or the way that I always describe is there's this horizon beyond, but it's a painted horizon. And the painted horizon is where people around you want you to go, but it's not your horizon. Until you find the horizon within, it's really hard for you to go to this horizon beyond. So find those champions and enablers, the people who are there to support your journey. And this is a commitment I have made to my classes I teach, to anybody who's there, is I'm here to support your journey. I'm not here to tell you what to do. And it's interesting because people see me as what I call, well, they come to me, they think of me as a monk sitting on top of a mountain with this beard and an orange saffron robe. And, David comes to me and says, I don't know which direction I should go. And I said, David, you should be a podcaster and this will help many people in your life. And you're like, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to go that direction. I call myself a monk, but I'm a difficult monk. In other words, the monk you seek is within yourself. My job as a difficult monk is to ask you questions so that you realize what matters to you and the direction you need to go. And I think you need to find more of those difficult monks in life who are going to challenge you and ask you these questions.
Yeah, I'd agree. I believe that we all have the truth inside of us. It's just a matter of listening and digging down, and a lot of times facing reality, facing the truth, facing what we don't want to believe, or facing what we've been told we shouldn't believe. I agree with you. Usually in the mirror, you quiet and be still and you find the answers, the Holy Spirit through you, and you just move forward with that and you'll always be well. All right. Well, then you made a comment and I made a comment about TEDx. We have listeners from over 81 countries around the globe, and we have a great community, but not all of them are the professional realm. Quickly, just give a definition. What is TEDx? Because some people have no idea what we're talking about, but from the professional realm, that's a big deal, just so you guys know.
Yeah. So the actual TED conferences are people that have stories to share and lessons that they feel they've lived, or facts, information. It's a place where it's a gathering of people who want to get insight. So then TEDx is a franchise of the main TED conference. And TEDx's are done all around the world as places where people go and they're able to experience, either as a speaker where they share different stories. So my first TEDx was on storytelling, and it's about how do you discover the extraordinary out of the ordinary. And the second TEDx I did was activating the voice within to be louder than the noise around. And people walk away with insights, practical tools, but even as an audience member, they're not there to just silently sit there. It's about activation and getting people to activate. So TEDx provides a forum of dialogue and discussion, and a place where ideas and thoughts can be shared.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam, for doing that. And these are things that are sometimes local, sometimes internationally broadcast. Sometimes you can see replays online, but TEDx's are usually, what's the word? Man, my mind just went blank. But
Like
usually
a franchise?
No, not a franchise. I'm going to say they're vetted. They're like the speakers are vetted. They're not just people standing up there. They're people who are like, they say it, they live it, they have results from teaching it. Their students have results from teaching it. So it's an honor to be a TEDx speaker.
Oh,
so
totally.
yeah. I just want people to understand like that, the frame of reference and Sam's, not just credentials, but respect in the community. So let's go back to one more thing too. And this is like, I believe there's one race, the human race. I have friends from all over the world. I believe culture is a huge difference. I believe there's nationalities and nations, and there's pride, and that's great. I think it's healthy, healthy human competition. You know, what your background is and my background is. Me and my friends tease each other all the time, you know, because there's stereotypes, and a lot of stereotypes are true, right? So I'm Italian, I'm American, I'm Italian, and that's where my heritage goes to. But in New England, I grew up outside of Boston, a town called Milford, Mass. But the whole mentality in New England is literally when they meet you, they're like, oh, Pasqualone. Oh, Iacopino. Oh, Civizzari. Where are you from? And that's the question. Or they'll joke, they know where you're from, and like, oh, you're an Irish kid. And like, you're like, no, I'm Italian. Like, they're just screwing with you. So one of the first conversation breakers in New England is, where are you from? Now, you said where you grew up, you're like, I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
So on that side of the world, would it be considered rude if somebody said, hey, Sam, what are you? Where are you from?
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting. And this is why I wrote my second book called Lost and Found, Seeking the Past and Finding Myself, because I grew up, like I said, Canadian. The way I describe it is, think of a duck's egg rolling into a swan's nest. And the swan hatches it. And when that duckling emerges, it looks around and sees the swan. It sees the other swans, and it starts becoming a swan. But eventually, it sees its reflection in the water and then looks at the others and say, wait, there's something different about me. And you know, I think that's the way I could describe what my life was like. I grew up as a Canadian, and you know, then you suddenly get beat up a couple of times because you know you look different. And then what I realized is, from a cultural aspect, people would ask me, "So where are you from?" And I'd be like, "Well, born in England, raised in Canada." They're like, "No. Your parents, what part of India are they from?" I'm like, "Actually, they're from Fiji." And then people are like, "Wait, are you?" Yeah. And then they're like, "Wait, are you Indian?" And it's like, "Well, my grandfathers came from India. My ancestors are from India." And they're like, "Oh." And then others will be like, "You're not Indian, you're Canadian," because they say that you don't act like what an Indian would, like from a cultural nuances and things like that. And I've even had people say, you know, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, born in England, raised in Canada." Or they'll be like, "What part of India?" No, where are you really from? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that.
I'm from S Street, man. I grew up 2 blocks away from you.
Yeah, there you go. But what I found is, so my life was, there's an Indian platter. It's called a thali. And it's a platter, but it's segmented with different types of foods. So in other words, for me, my thali was British, Canadian, Indian, and Fijian. And no matter which crowd I was running with, that's the one that I would be playing. But I went to India back in 2004 to search for my ancestral roots with just a photograph and very little information. All I had was just, this faded photograph and little else. And part
Hey,
of it
Sam,
was to
actually, I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to interrupt you because I want to ask you one question that ties
Sure.
into this.
Yeah.
I mean it. I'm not saying it to be politically
Yeah.
correct because I don't believe in
No.
politically correct. I think people are snowflakes these days and they need
Yeah.
to toughen up. All right. Flat out.
Sure.
I think
Go
if,
ahead.
if you're going to cancel me because of something I say, then you're closed-minded when you're saying you're open. So
Yeah.
period. My listeners know where we're coming from.
Sure.
But there's one race, the human race, but there is different cultures. And
Yep.
as you got older, you started seeing that, hey, I'm different. And there was something inside of you that was driving you to learn your culture.
Yep.
That doesn't mean you weren't proud to be a Canadian or proud to be British, but there is something that our ancestral roots, I swear God puts in us.
Yeah.
Because I know when I went to Italy on
Mm-hmm.
vacation, I never felt better. I never slept better. I performed at a higher level. I mean, it literally was like something in my genetic code was unlocked.
Right.
And I talked to one of my other buddies who was adopted.
Mm-hmm.
He never knew where he was from,
Mm.
was in the military, was deployed overseas. He's in this little country and the dude's eating right and like feels great and he's happy. Never felt like that way in his life. Then he comes back 20 years later, finds out that's where all his ancestry's from. Literally, he was 3 miles away from like his hometown.
Wow.
Okay. So I do believe that there's something that's genetic and DNA, whatever you want to call it, God-led inside of us. But what was it that took you from the transition of where you are to I'm going to find this, I'm going to search? What was that transition like for you? And how did you start and get into your journey so other people can too?
So for me, there were two things that were really important. The first thing was that, nobody really put stock in this. People are living in the here and now, but the ancestral piece was not important to them. And for me, it was just a fine thread that was left. If I don't do this and it skips a generation, our ancestral roots are gone forever. And, I've always said, for me, I thrive in ambiguity, uncertainty. Give me something complicated and difficult, I roll up my sleeves and that's what I enjoy. So all I had was just a faded photograph, very little information. And I thought to myself, okay, this is a challenge. I need to take this on. Because of the ancestral piece, the thread that was there. The other part was my father, he's done a lot for me. And, through the struggles and the trials and tribulations, and I really wanted to do something for him. So I decided that this was one thing that I could do because he's never been to India and I needed to see if I could find this. And I went, it literally was looking for a needle in a haystack, but not knowing where the haystack was.
Yeah. Where's the population in India now is over 1 billion, right?
Oh, it's like 1.7 billion.
Yeah. Small haystack, easy.
And the information we had was very limited. But what was really interesting along this journey, because it took me about a year to prepare for this, I was asking people who were near this place. So our village name is what we knew it as, is called Chadodi. It sits 6 miles away from a post office or the town of Garshankar in a district called Hoshiarpur. Okay, so that's what I have. So I started asking people from Hoshiarpur or even people who knew Garshankar, well, have you heard of the village Chadodi? And they were like, nope, never heard of it. But more importantly, why are you even searching? Like, there's a good chance you're not going to find this village. There's also a good chance that, if you find the village, you may not get a good reception. And it's like all of these blocks were put in front of me, these obstacles. Well, I look at it this way. I was like, fine, don't help. So a day before I left, my step cousin in Fiji sent me an email and he basically said, look, I've made it to Garshankar, didn't find the village, but the village name is Janodi. And I thought Chadoti, Janoti, that sounds very similar. Couldn't find Janoti, but I found a place called Jandoli. So Jandoli, Chadoti, it sounds very similar. And I asked my father, what do you think? He says, actually, you know what? That may be the place that you need to go because it sits 6 miles from Garshankar. But we went to India and it was great. I mean, I really embraced the whole aspect about it. And what was interesting, what resonated for me was the term tourist and traveler. A tourist only wants to see that place, but they don't want to experience. So they want to see India in all its magnificence, but does not want to experience the poverty. Me, whenever I travel, I want to be a traveler. I want to experience. I want to see what it's like. Don't shield and hide things from me. So I went to India and I got to see the Taj Mahal, amazing structure, like pictures do not do the place justice. I went to the Golden Temple, which is the holiest place for all Sikhs. And I'm not really a religious person, but I had a spiritual moment there. And it was also then finding this village. And I went in search, and it was a difficult search. The first day we went to this place in Jandoli with all this anticipation of connecting, and it wasn't the right place. And now you think to yourself, the 1.7 billion people, my village is somewhere here, and I feel like I'm close. The next day, I just told my driver, I said, forget what everyone has told us. Let's just drive to Garshankar. Let's just ask people. And sure enough, people were like, nope, never heard of it. No, I think you're in the wrong place, but good luck in the search. Ideally and ultimately in the end, though, somebody said, wait, Chadoti, it's actually 6 miles up the road this way. And I write in my journal, here we go again, like as in, okay, I've gone through the setbacks. Let's give it a try, but I'm not prepared. I mean, I'm prepared for the worst, that this isn't it. And then we weren't going to find our village. We drove to this place.
And actually, can I ask you a question too?
Sure.
Was there a point in your journey, you're just trying to seek truth and find answers? But when you're asking questions like that in a foreign country, you could literally be set up to be robbed. Or, I mean, was there any threat or fear? Or did you feel pretty comfortable because you had a guide?
Actually, we had the guide with us, and he sort of seemed to be our protector. And, I can speak the language to some extent. My wife is actually fluent in it. I'm conversational, but we let the driver do all the maneuvering with regards to the conversations. And that's how we were able to get to this place. And it took us to an archway, and there's this old man sitting there. And he basically is looking at this. We give him the picture, and I'm like, it's a faded photograph. This guy's like 90 years old. Seems like he fell off a charm bracelet, and just basic, that type of old man. And just you think to yourself, there's no way this guy could even see the people in the picture. I mean, it's hard to even make out who they are. He said, no, I think the house is up this way, but it doesn't look like this. And he came with us, and I just remember walking up to this house again after many times we've had setbacks, and 10 people came out, and they all sort of looked at this picture, and this one lady with a white shawl looked at the picture and said, that's me. Who are you? Like, I was able to actually find my grandfather's house, and it was just this journey.
That's crazy. So who was that woman?
So it turned out that my grandfather, being the second in the family, was not going to inherit much at the farm. So oftentimes in our culture, the second born joins the military, the police, government, travels the world. And so this was my grandfather's older brother's side of the family. That's how close this was. So they had heard about us, but they didn't know who we were. And it was a reuniting of an entire ancestral line that had actually been missing. And what was really, for me, this persistence piece is I went to India and I took Ziploc bags with me with the idea that this was something that I was going to do. It was to find my grandfather's village, because then I went out into the fields and I scooped up dirt, and I brought the dirt back to my father. So he actually has the village with him. And, so now a lot of our family members have these curio boxes with the family's dirt from our village in there. So it's an epic search. It's more than just you go there, have a picture, find a village, and story. There's a lot that's poured into this book about the cultural side, the flavors, the sounds, the how I was feeling. And if I may, David, one thing that really clarified for me in this was that's why the book is called Lost and Found: Seeking the Past and Finding Myself. I went seeking for the past, which was reuniting with my ancestral roots, which is what I did. But it was also about finding myself, because earlier I described this thali, which is a platter, and segmented dishes where I am British, Canadian, Indian, and Fijian. But my realization, and I write about it in my book, is instead of looking at my life as a thali and segmenting my life, I'm an Indian rice dish called khichdi. And a khichdi is, basically it's like an omelet. You basically just, go to your fridge, whatever's there, you sort of mix it all up. And in khichdi, it's a rice dish with vegetables, and you add your spices and flavors to it. But I realized I went to India seeking out my Indian roots, or, being Indian. David, I was always Indian. That's what my realization was. So that's why it's Lost and Found: Seeking the Past and Finding Myself, because the realization of finding myself was equally as important as now finding that village.
That's so good. And I started chuckling if somebody saw me smile when you said, you have dirt on your family. I'm thinking, man, most people don't want any dirt on their family, and you got the real dirt, the legit dirt.
Yep,
That's
I do.
so awesome. And I want to ask you another question, and I don't want to be ignorant or
No,
offensive.
of course. No.
But I've had friends from India, and they explained to me that when they got married,
Mhm,
it's not like America where the standard marriage,
mhm,
you take the husband's last name. It
mhm.
was something like the father's first name became your last name when a child was born. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because the reason why I triggered is because I'm thinking to myself, to find someone in America is hard enough. But now you're switching first names and last names and middle names. I'm like, that must be like a nightmare. So what is that, and how does it work? And did that affect your search?
Yeah, no, because in our culture, the thing to think about India is it's not homogenous. In fact, India is such a diverse country. It's got hundreds of languages and dialects, and equally at the same time, multiple religions. It just depends what part of India you're exploring and looking at. In our part, no, the idea is that the woman would take the husband's family name. And that's actually now, which I'm looking at and I actually appreciate, is that's actually changing. Now, some of the women are saying, nope, I'm keeping my family name. And, families are accepting it and whatnot. Still a lot of work needs to be done. But in my part of the world, it's just whatever the family name is, that person will adopt that. Now, in certain cultures, and I'm not 100% sure, but I believe in Muslim culture, maybe that's where, you would take that name. But again, I'm not 100% sure because I'm not quite familiar with that faith.
Okay, yeah, there was a couple of my friends, and they were
Mhm.
separate, totally
Yep,
separate experiences, and they were just explaining, like, if the name was John Amos, then the
yep,
child would be like Amos, and then the wife's last name, and it was like this chain that kept
yep.
going. I thought, wow, you're not using what is that, ancestry.com, buddy? That's going to be tough to track.
Totally.
So all this journey,
Yep.
how did it change you, and what did it do for you? Like you said, you found yourself, and you
Mhm.
found you were already there. Explain that. How did it impact Sam's life?
Yeah, the way it impacted is the fact that it made me realize that a couple of things. Number one, that I'm a traveler, not a tourist. I want to experience life. I want to experience other cultures. I want to learn more about what I call stories. One of my favorite quotes is, everyone's life is an autobiography. Make yours worth reading. We are living stories. And I think what we need to do is listen to other people's stories. It made me realize that, I can have multiple different flavors and cultures within me. And instead of segmenting, just to embrace the fact that I am this individual who comes, with all of these amazing experiences, cultural life experiences, etc., but to embrace them all. I think that's the biggest lesson I got.
That's awesome. Now, for people out there who, whether they were adopted or whether they just, the parents died young, they know nothing about their family or they want to learn more, what would you recommend the steps for them to start this journey?
Yeah, part of it is, I always say, look at where your feet may land. In other words, the realization is, even with me, is I may not find my village, but I am in a place, and accept the fact that, I'm in India and this is where my ancestors came from. Then I went up to the Punjab, which is where my direct descendants are from. And even if I didn't find them, I'm in a place where this is where my ancestral roots come from. It may not be the pinpoint like I found, but, accept the fact that maybe sometimes really it's just a matter of like you mentioned when you went to Italy, it just felt right. It felt like home, and embrace that and appreciate that. So, you may not be able to accomplish what I set out to do, and I was prepared. And it wasn't going to be disappointing, but also at the same time, you may go in with one idea of what you're seeking and, everything is focused, but I went in with an open mind. And that's how I was able to actually unlock not just the village, but also who I am as an individual, because I was open to that, to say, okay, and being very reflective and appreciative. So anybody who's going out there to seek, just know that if you get to the place where your ancestors came from, the country, let's say, for example, or the place in the world that just feels right, embrace that and just say, you know what, this is where I'm meant to be. This is where I may not have found the exact location, but you know what? This is a place my ancestors have been to, or that I can connect to. And I think that's the most important part.
I think that's great advice. And
Mm-hmm.
for myself, I have that traveler's heart. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to just be a tourist and a window shopper. I'd love to move to every country for as
Yeah.
long, I can only live so many years, but
Yeah.
I'd love to live places and I'd love to stay there and be part of the culture, and not to be insincere, shallow for selfish
No.
reasons, just to enjoy it. But
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go to India. I've always wanted to go to China. I want to go to almost every country for different
Yeah.
reasons, but I would say India is in my top 3 right now. I just have this
Right.
strong desire to go. I have so many friends from there.
Yeah.
They all seem like just sweet, humble people.
Mm.
And I don't know, man. There's just something inside me. Now I know I have no DNA from India, but man, there's just something that's drawn me to that culture.
And that's the most important thing. And I just want to read you just a small quote that I have that just gives you the essence of the journey I took.
Yeah, please do.
Travel isn't always pretty. It isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it hurts. It even breaks your heart, but that's okay. The journey changes you. It should change you. It leaves marks on your memory, on your consciousness, on your heart, and on your body. You take something with you. Hopefully you leave something good behind. And that was by Anthony Bourdain. And I think that when I read that quote, I just was like, that's my life. That's the way that I love to travel. I want to engage. I want to meet people. I want to experience. But equally, I want to share, you know?
Oh, absolutely. So let's do this and let's transition into, you just went through your story. So from your birth
Mhm,
through today, is there
mhm.
anything we missed that's significant that you want to communicate that'll help our audience, or something we haven't mentioned yet? Is there
Sure.
anything we've missed before we transition to where Sam today and where are you going?
Sure. I just wanted to add that, this whole piece of understanding who I am as opposed to what, I was like everybody else. What am I going to do, especially at graduation from university? And I still remember that sitting at graduation at university saying, okay, the next step, I walked across the stage, shook the hands of the dignitaries. And when I walked off the stage, a giant virtual door slammed behind me. And everything familiar to me was behind that virtual door. But I sat down and I said, okay, now I'm going to start applying for jobs, because that's the next thing that is logical and rational to do, because I graduated university with a degree in business and political science. And the idea is that, with that mentality going forward, I was like, okay, who's lucky to get me? Because I have a degree in business and political science, a killer combination. So I started applying for jobs. And back then you had to write letters or type letters, hand deliver them or mail them. And I sent 10 of them out, 12 of them out. And about a week and a half later, a letter came back. Opened it up. It was from one of the companies that said, sorry, we don't have a job for you, but good luck. And I thought, no problem. I'll just send more letters out, which I did. And the more letters I sent out, the more letters came back. And what I have here are my 86 rejection letters when I graduated university. These are the people who said, we don't have a job for you. We're not sure what you're looking for. Good luck. 86 rejections. And I will tell you, every single letter was a nail in my coffin of self-confidence. But eventually I got a job, and it was business, political science. So people think, okay, government work, entry level. I said, exactly. I was a janitor mopping floors and emptying rubbish bins in a hospital.
Nice.
You know? Okay. But I never looked at it as a negative. I said, okay, wait a minute. Here I am, degree on my wall, and I have to move forward. And I remember 3 life lessons that actually still carries me to who I am today. And I've embraced them ever since. The first lesson, my father said, I don't care what you do, you make sure you do the best job possible. So do you know what? At the end of my shift, there was no floor cleaner and no rubbish bin left full. The second valuable life lesson I learned was there were times I would get on the elevator with nurses, doctors, and administrators, not all the times, but there were times I just was ignored because you're a janitor and not a professional, and we have nothing in common. They never took the time to try to understand my story. So this is why I do 3 to 8 conversations a week with people to help them in their journey, because I know what it feels like to be ignored, and I never want someone to feel that way. The third valuable lesson is the fact that there are lessons in anything and everything that we can do. Instead of looking at it as good or bad, what am I learning? And that's in anything we do, there are lessons to be learned. And I reflect on these letters now. David, if one of those letters would have materialized, I would not be with you today because my life would have gone in a different trajectory. I now embrace those letters as rejections. And the second part that's important is many of these companies no longer exist, but I still do. I outlasted these companies, and that's the resilience that our people will show as well. And it brings me to a quote that I've embraced and that I live, which is, obstacles are the necessary bricks on our road to success. In other words, don't fear the rejections, don't fear those pieces, learn from it and emerge stronger. But we need the obstacles. You're not going to have 100% of the victories. So know that the obstacles are there and they will help you get to your successes. They are part of the ingredients towards your success.
Oh, well said. I couldn't agree more, Sam. Going back to your valuable 3 life lessons, basically, if I'm repeating them back to you,
Yep.
you learn do your best from your dad. You learn from the janitorial position, respect all people and listen to them. They have value. And then there's lessons to be learned in everything we do. So embrace whatever's going on.
Totally.
All right, listeners, you got that? Go back, listen to it again. If you're driving, listen. If you're not, write it down. Help stick it in the brain. All right, Sam. So where are you today and where are you headed? How can we help you get to your next benchmark or goal?
Yeah, no, I've got 5 things that guide and direct me in life: servant leadership, story sharing, activator igniter, champion enabler, and a community do-gooder. Those 5 things become my foundation, and anything that I embrace or want to do has to hit 5 out of 5. So I'm an educator at university, and I get an opportunity to share stories and try to help people in their journey because I teach organizational behavior. It's more than just theories and concepts. It's about helping them realize the purpose in their life. I'm still a writer, besides the books I've written, I'm still going to be writing more. I'm a blogger where, I've got about 170 blog posts about these stories and life experiences to help people in their journey. I'm a speaker, and I like to share at keynotes and workshops to help people again with the journey. And also I'm a mentor and a coach. I mean, I do about 3 to 8 conversations a week. It's been about 5,000 to date, because it's important to be there to guide and support these people. And the one piece that's a bit separate from all of this is my outlet. All of these things I've just shared with you help to realize what my purpose is in life. But I've also embraced woodworking, because to me, that's the outlet where I really enjoy being there, working on making woodworking projects like tables or charcuterie boards, shelves. But the act of doing it is therapeutic, because I'm sanding, but this is where thoughts and ideas are emerging from. And I highly recommend people, especially during this pandemic, find your outlet. Find something that engages you, whether it's yoga, cooking, art, woodworking, it doesn't matter. Find an outlet, because you'll see that this really helps create that creative space in your brain and in your mind to help you. You asked where I'm planning on going. Actually, just carrying on. As long as I've got those 5 things that are important in my life, and I encourage people to come up with 5 things that you're not willing to compromise, because it's life and career, not just career. It's just about continuing on with this act of fulfillment and, continuing on to support people and helping people in their journey. That's what my purpose is.
Wow, thank you. And going back to the outlet, if you're like busy and run down and you're working, I highly recommend you listen to Sam and find an outlet, find a hobby. And like yours probably meant extra too, because your dad, you said, was into carpentry. So there's more of that heritage and special and that lineage. But I mean, I know myself, even just working out, last week I felt so sick that I thought, what is going on with me? What do I have? Do I need to go to the doctor? But I'm like, dude, you haven't worked out in 3 years. Get your fat, lazy self to the gym and go work out. Yeah. I literally walked in 2 days last week feeling like, do I need to go to the doctor? And then I left feeling good.
Yeah.
And then now every day since then, for a week, I've been working out. I'm just like, I just need this outlet as part of my life, because it helps me just de-stress and it helps me feel better. And what people don't understand is, now that I've de-stressed and feel better, I took a 2-hour trunk start to finish. By the time you change, drive to the gym, work out, come back, shower. Okay, it's 2 hours, but now the rest of the 22 hours are more productive. So is that how you're feeling with the woodworking?
Oh man, yeah. It's like I just go into my garage and when I purchased wood, I mean, right now I'm just making different things, and then all of these people are like, man, that's some pretty cool stuff you've just created. But it's also made, like, it's not manufactured in a mass-produced way. Every piece is unique. Every piece has, a bit of a story, where the tree was from. Some of it, I know where some of the trees are from. You join it together, and all of a sudden you have this natural butterfly in this wood because you've book matched it. And people are like, man, that's fantastic. So I really, part of it is whether someone reads my book and just, says, oh my gosh, I love the journey, or buys, one of my woodworking projects and says, man, I just need to have a piece of this in my house, because it comes from a place that was done authentically, is the best feeling.
Okay, man, you just triggered something in my brain. I'm kind of a weirdo, but you just said how you have the different pieces and how they come together.
Yep.
Have you taken a piece from Britain, a piece from Fiji, a piece from India, a piece from Canada, and made one project yet?
Not yet, but
that would be awesome.
Yeah, it would be, because it really brings it together. But the interesting thing you've just said, though, is something I do. It's about the connectedness, right? And I'm going to share something with you. And this has become such a powerful tool. And it's one that I actually see a transformation on people's faces when I share this with them. So I carry with me jigsaw puzzle pieces. So you can see there's one piece right here, but this is what people feel like. They feel like a single piece of a jigsaw puzzle. They don't know where they fit in. They don't know, what the bigger picture is in life, but this is what they feel like. And right before your eyes, I'm going to make it extraordinary. Because instead of focusing on this, we focus on the satchel. And I tell people, if I give you a piece of my jigsaw puzzle, Do you realize my puzzle is now permanently incomplete without you? Do you realize how important you are to the completion of my puzzle? And David, I see the transformation on their face. You know, the most amazing piece is I hear from people saying it's taped to my mirror. Every morning I wake up, it reminds me someone said I was important. It sits in a curio box that they have in a special place. It's traveled the world. People have it in their wallet and they see me and they say, look, I still have it. Or they frantically seek me out saying, I lost the puzzle piece and I feel disconnected. I want to be connected. Could I get a piece? I've given over 5,000 pieces in the world to date, just to remind people how important they are and how important they are to me.
Oh, that's beautiful and just so inspiring. Awesome, man. Well, Sam, it's been a pleasure. You truly are a remarkable friend. Anything you want to discuss before we close up this episode? Any kind of special offers? We'll put a link in the show notes to your website, your books, but anything else you want to cover before we take off?
Just the fact that, I just want to reflect back on my signature tagline. Everyone's life is an autobiography. Make yours worth reading. You are a living story. Everybody who's listening is a living story. And I never want people to feel that they're not interesting. If something is important to you, it's worth sharing. And the fact that you are a living story and you have an autobiography, I want people to realize how significant, magnificent, and important they are. And in days we may not feel that, but know that you are an individual who has worked through, stuff. You've celebrated things. Start reflecting and appreciating what you've accomplished in life. And you'd be amazed at what, the magnificence you've actually accumulated. That's what I really would like to share with people.
Well, thank you, Sam, for being here today. You truly are a remarkable guy. Ladies and gentlemen all over the world, we love you. You are special. If you want a puzzle piece to remember that, reach out to Samurai.
Of course.
Either way, one of us will get it and initial the back and send it off to you, right? If you need anything, let us know. Like you said, Sam's a coach and a consultant. If you want some inspiration, reach out to him. If you've liked this episode, if you know somebody to help, please share it. Subscribe to our YouTube and the podcast. But the main thing is we're just here to help you grow. Sam's here to help you grow. So let's do it together, right? Like our slogan says, don't just listen to good information, but do it each day, repeat it for life so you can have a great life in this world and in the eternity to come. So I'm David Pasqualone. This is our friend Sam. Have a remarkable day, our friends, and we will see you soon in another episode. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.